serving up fantastic pizza throughout Western New York for the past 4 generations now. So make sure that you give back to them, give back to all local businesses in the Buffalo area, but make Picasso's part of your game day traditions now and for seasons to come. This is our weekly crossover episode. As always, Kevin Misseri joining me. Kevin, how's it going today, man?
Doing well, man. Just getting through this rainy, windy week we're going to have here.
Yep, it's an ugly weather for Sunday, even on Long Island right now. The weather's not too good. And right now for the crossover, got Mark Schofield. He covers the Pats for Pat's Pulpit. Also has some work going for USA Today. Mark, thank you for being so generous with your time. How's it going for you?
I've been better as a Patriots fan, but, maybe they'll be able to get things right by Sunday. Maybe not. We'll see. But it's great to be with you guys. Fun, excited. Huge game to talk about. We got coming up Sunday, so excited to get into it.
Yeah, definitely is a huge game. It's actually the first time since 2001 that the Patriots are below 500 coming into Week 8, which is, as someone who's born in 96, this is foreign territory for me. But we'll start off on the defensive side of the ball for the Patriots. Obviously making news the past week or so, or maybe the past couple of days, is just the idea that Stephon Gilmore might be on the move. The Patriots, their secondary hasn't been as scary as it was in past years. They're allowing second most yards per attempt in the NFL. From what I know, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, whoever trades for Gilmore would have to take on half of his contract, which is about $7 million, give or take. So has there been any more movement on that front? Do we expect him to still be in a Patriots uniform come Sunday for this game?
We expect him to be in the Patriots uniform for this game on Sunday. It's what happens Sunday that might determine that. Mm-hmm. Because, as I wrote this week, as I've talked about this week, Bill Belichick has 1 week to save the Patriots 2020 season. That's the task in front of them right now. Because if they win this game, you get to 3-4, and you can make a case that you could, make a run on the division. You've got a game in hand against Buffalo. There's no reason to panic. They can sort of figure things out on both sides of the football. Mm-hmm. If they lose and get to 2-5, I think the division's kind of out the window at that point. You have to think long and hard about what you want to do with a trade deadline coming up in just 2 days, and just 48 hours or so after that game. And so I think where he ends up, where Gilmore plays in, say, week 9 and 10, is going to be determined by what happens in this game on Sunday. And that's part of the reason why it's a huge game for both of these teams, because not just the playoff implications, the division implications, the future of the New England Patriots franchise could be determined, or at least how they go about constructing that future, by what happens on Sunday. Because if Buffalo wins this game, you might see them become sellers at the trade deadline. You might see a Stephon Gilmore move. You might see them move some other pieces. You might see them, depending on his health, try to move Julian Edelman. I mean, this could really sort of shape the next couple of years of the New England Patriots by what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed it's an interesting predicament for Belichick, because obviously running the roster as well as managing his day-to-day operations and managing the roster just construction and managing who's playing well, who's not playing well, who he's going to roll out. That's a lot to worry about over one early, I guess if you want to call it, mid-season game. So there's got to be a lot going on in New England. And I guess we'll start with, where do you stand on the situation, knowing what you know now, knowing what the offense is able to do, knowing where your defense is at in New England? Do you think that they should sell? I mean, just straight up, if you were to predict, or are you really basing it on how they look when they come up to Buffalo?
I mean, I think in large part they should give serious considerations to being sellers right now. I mean, I think obviously what happens Sunday will push them in one direction or another. If they lose, I think you have to, start getting ready for 2021. And I think if they do lose and the offense continues to struggle as it has been the past couple of weeks, you have a quarterback situation to figure out. Sometimes what happens in football media, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. When we get a big result, when we get a big game, we sometimes focus on the wrong lesson from that game. If you think back to week 2, that game between Seattle and New England, when New England came back and they lost at the end, but it looked like, hey, they're scoring points, 30 points against Seattle, they're throwing the ball downfield. Maybe they have a vertical passing game now. That was a takeaway a lot of people, myself included, had. I think that game told us more about Seattle's defense and their woes on that side than New England's offense. New England's offense is struggling, and that's continued over the past couple of weeks. Their passing game is a massive question mark. And so I think they have to start thinking about, okay, what's the 2021, 22, 23 plan at quarterback? Cam Newton, very well, it might not be the answer. And so if you lose this game, you will probably have a top 10 draft pick, at least come Monday morning. But will that be enough to get the guy you want? You might have to think about moving Stephon Gilmore, maybe for a first-round pick. Whatever you can get for some other pieces you might want to move. Because you might have to start accumulating draft capital to perhaps get to the top of the draft to get the guy you want. So, yeah, I think sitting here right now, Kevin, they look like sellers to me. I've written and said that this week. Now, maybe they shock everybody, myself included, to win this game Sunday and think they can make a run, in which case, great. I think more likely than not, though, we're talking about them being sellers at the deadline.
Right. Now, cap-wise, we'll kind of continue down this trend. $26 million to roll over. I mean, that's a lot of money when the team's over.
They have a lot of money. They can certainly make some moves, next year in free agency. I've been asked about Dak Prescott. I'm sure they'd explore that. They might have the room to make something like that possible. So this could be a quick transition turnaround for them, but they have to handle it the right way. And that's, they might have a rare opportunity as an organization to have an early first-round pick, something they haven't really had in a while. They've been picking near the end of the first round for the most part. And so it's when you have those opportunities, you might be wise to sort of take advantage of them when they fall into your lap, and that could be the situation New England's in. But yeah, Kevin, they have a lot of cap space, so they could be smart, they could be aggressive. They don't have to pick around the edges of free agency like they've been known to do in the past. They can make a splash signing or two and sort of really give a little talent injection to either side of the football or both sides of the football, given their cap space.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the 2017 Bills. I mean, they were in the same situation going into that crazy draft class of the Sam Darnolds and the Josh Allens, and they needed to move players. I mean, straight up, they sold it in 2017 and still made the playoffs at 9-7 with some playoff scenarios and situations that went on for them in their favor. But they sold Sammy Watkins. I mean, they sold Ronald Darby. They made those sales and accumulated those assets, and it was really big. I mean, to go 9-7, make the playoffs, whatever, end the drought here, and they've been on an upward trajectory since. But more importantly, they had that draft capital that gave them position to get Josh. I mean, I don't think Josh Allen's a Buffalo Bill if they don't sell Sammy Watkins. So similar scenarios there in New England that maybe you can learn from your division or past experiences. I know this is new uncharted territory for them. That draft capital is so big because even going for 4 picks up, it cost the Bills 2 extra seconds. And they had to deal with Denver to come up and spend both of their first round picks just to move up 5 or 6 spots. In order to get that. And they said, no, we're not trading. We want our defensive end. We're staying pat. We weren't expecting him to be here. The Bills are kind of sitting there like, if another deal's worked out, they're in trouble. So that draft capital is huge. And does a year and a half of Stephon Gilmore per his current contract, is that enough with a team that's starting 2-4 to keep on to potentially ruin that opportunity for one of those top 3 quarterbacks in this class?
I mean, that's the decision they'll face, Kevin. And we know the cost is even steeper when you're moving up to get a quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
The more draft capital you can accumulate starting right now at the trade deadline, the better position you will be to pay that quarterback premium to get up to get a guy. I mean, if you're coming up to get an offensive tackle or a wide receiver, yeah, it'll cost you. If you're coming up to the top of the board to get a quarterback, teams know you're coming up for that. You're going to have to pay a steep price. So, just flipping, looking at it right now, they're set to pick in the 11th, I think, or 12th spot. Swapping first rounders with somebody who's picking a 2 or 4, that's not going to do it. You're going to need to bring more to the table, and that might start with moving Stephon Gilmore and getting a first in exchange for it.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I want to talk about what you put up today on Pat's pulpit, your diagnosis of the Pats Patriots game or the Pats passing game. We'll start with the Patriots offense. I know it's probably your least favorite discussion right now as you talk about it with everybody. 3 passing touchdowns in New England right now. It's just unheard of to say.
Bizarre.
While Josh Allen's 4th in the league in throwing in a lot of categories, top 5 in most categories. So I'm going to start there. The passing game. What's going on with it? Talk about your article. Plug it a little bit. What's happening? I watched it, so I'd like
on. And what's interesting, we'll start with this premise, guys. Tony Dungy said something on Sunday night during Sunday Night Football that might be extremely true, which is Bill Belichick's the best there is at turning the team around on short order. And that's great, and that might be true. But it's a lot tougher when you're talking about this Patriots passing game right now because there's no one problem. There's no silver bullet or easy fix. It's not like you just need a better left tackle. Okay, well, get a better left tackle on the trade market. Or it's not like you need just one wide receiver. No, there's problems all over the place. You look at this game against San Francisco, there are moments when Newton doesn't have time to work through his reads. There are moments when Newton has time to work through his reads, but guys aren't open. There are moments when Newton has time to work through his reads, guys are open, but he's not pulling the trigger on route concepts that he should be able to figure out that are basic core components of the Patriots playbook. The third and final interception he threw against San Francisco came on Haas's Z juke. It's day one install of their offense, guys. And he's got the hitch route to Rex Burkhead on the sideline, working against a linebacker who's giving him 7 or 8 yards of cushion.
On that play.
But he doesn't throw it. And then the seam route's covered from Bird in the slots. Okay. Then you come to Edelman on the juke route, and he and Edelman aren't on the same page. I don't know exactly what happened. My best guess is Newton started to get pressure. Edelman saw it, saw where the pressure was coming from, started to move and flow with him, expected him to bail, but Newton made the throw anyway. It was slightly off target because Newton couldn't step into it, and it's off target, deflected, and intercepted. And the final thing I'll mention is mechanics. I mean, his mechanics are a question mark right now, and Cam Newton has never been the most mechanically sound passer. You know, if I were coaching high school kids, college kids, I wouldn't exactly pull some Cam Newton tape and say, hey, what you want your mechanics to look like? You know, I'd pull like Brad Kaya, but Brad Kaya is not in the NFL and Cam Newton is. So mechanics, you know, as I've said before, they don't matter until they matter. We're seeing them matter right now with Cam Newton because he is missing throws because of his mechanics. He had a two-hopper that I highlighted in that video to Bird on a comeback to the left sideline where he stepped 90 degrees from his target with his left foot. So they're an issue too. So that's a lot to fix. Now, can Bill Belichick fix all of that if he had a training camp period to do it or a month to do it? Probably. 7 days before the Buffalo Bills? That's a lot. Now, maybe it ends up being the 40-degree, 50-degree wind, you know, rainy type monsoon conditions in Buffalo this weekend. And so maybe it can be, I saw a great tweet online today where Belichick dusts off his Navy triple option playbook and they're just putting the flex bone on Sunday. Could that work? Sure. Would Belichick try it if he thought it would work? Absolutely. But absent something like that, hard to be optimistic that they'll fix the passing game in just 7 days.
That's a short amount of time, and got N'Keal Harry killed too, pretty underratedly too.
That was one of those plays where, you know, that was an example, Kevin, where I think if he had time, he would have gotten to Edelman on his sort of ram route, they call it in their playbook, where you start to the outside, come inside, he's working against an outside leverage defender, but he didn't have time. You know, the 49ers ran a little twist up front. Both the right tackle and the running back, James White, they kind of got crossed up on their protection assignments. And he had to make a quick throw. He threw the first read, and N'Keal Harry got lit up. You know, that happens, but it's just yet another example, Kevin, to this bigger point that there's no easy fix. There's a lot going on right now. And yes, the Bills' defense hasn't been great, but I think it's been good enough where this Patriots offense would struggle to fall if they have to throw the ball to get back into the game come Sunday.
And you brought up the weather that's forecasted for this weekend, possibly 50-mile-an-hour winds, really rainy, ugly day. Could be like an Army-Navy game, basically. So, you know, maybe the passing game doesn't factor in as much just because of that. So maybe here's how we can transition to the run game. You know, Sony Michel's been out with COVID. He's been on IR for most of the season. Damian Harris came back and he looked great in one game, which was great for my fantasy team. But, you know, now he's kind of just fading into the mix. You never know what to think of what Bill Belichick's doing with his running backs. One week it'll be James White with, you know, so many catches, and then, you know, throw back to LeGarrette Blount getting like 4 touchdowns on like 5 one-yard runs, basically. What can we expect? Can you possibly diagnose that?
I wish I could. I'd be a much richer man if I could figure out, you know, back uses, because that's the question I get so often week in and week out. Okay, who should I roster this good fantasy out of a New England background? I just don't know. I think a lot of the struggles with the run game the past couple of weeks is they've been down early. You know, they were down 18-3 to Denver. They were down 23-3 to San Francisco. And they were forced by game script to become more of a one-dimensional team. I think where they want to be is more of a, you know, mix of run schemes, diverse schematically, but a running football team where they'll do some gap power stuff. They'll do some inside zone, outside zone. They'll do some zone read type stuff with Cam Newton, get his legs involved. That's where they'd like to be. And if they can keep games as 1-score games or 10-point games, they'll feel comfortable doing that. But when you're down 20, when you're down 15, and it's in the second half, and it's in the fourth quarter, you've got to throw the football. That's where they struggle the most. And so if they can keep it in those sort of positive or neutral game script situations, you'll see a variety in the run game. You'll see some outside zone stuff, mostly with Rex Burkhead, sometimes with James White. They like him on those designs. They do like Damian Harris on some of those as well. They've done a lot in the crack toss game. They really used that against the Raiders, trying to neutralize their speed up front, using the wide receivers to get those crack blocks, working downhill to the inside. That's something that they like to do when they can sort of get some stuff to the edges. They like guys like Isaiah Wynn, their left tackle, moving in space and pulling in front of those designs. So if they can be in those positive script situations, they'll run that stuff. And, of course, they'll try to get Cam Newton and his legs involved as well. Some of that zone read stuff, some of that inverted veer stuff where, he's reading a linebacker, he's reading a defensive end and sort of forcing your hand and forcing you into a mistake because whatever you do, you'll be wrong as a defense. That's where they'd like to be. Now, can they get there? That's the biggest question.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at, I had some statistics jotted down, some advanced statistics here. James White's been terrible in pass blocking. I know it's been limited.
Yeah.
It's weird to me. So you know what's going to happen if James White steps on the field. So of note, though, real quickly, Quentin Jefferson and Vernon Butler did not participate in practice today again. Those are two big key cogs to the Bills. Butler's supposed to be that interior pass rusher. Haven't really gotten it from him. Struggled a lot. Quentin Jefferson does a little bit of everything pretty well. Those would be huge losses in this game, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to point out is they haven't had their offensive line together really for an extended period of time.
True.
I mean, I saw that they've had 5 different starting offensive line combinations so far through 6 games. They've only really had their starting core group at the start of the year. Now they're trying to figure it out. But they've used many more combinations of offensive linemen than just those 5. And so, they're still trying to piece together where they want their offensive line to be. I think if everybody was healthy, you might see Wynn, Tooney, Andrews, maybe rookie Michael Owenu at right guard. They kind of like what he's done so far in Jermaine Illuminor. But they've had to use Justin Herron. They've had to use Hilde Froholt. They've had to use Joe Tooney at center. I mean, you've had guys playing out of position. And so, I think they're relatively healthy going into this game up front. But that's also been a huge question mark. So even if guys are out, they might be healthy, but they might not be. They might have guys get banged up, and they'll struggle again moving guys around. Also a huge question mark for them.
For sure. And, I mean, Burkhead's carrying the load. 172 offensive snaps. Kind of crazy to me that Damian Harris isn't getting more. He's kind of filled 56 snaps on the year for Damian Harris. I know he started off injured. But I thought for sure he'd be the Sonny Michel role. He's getting limited snaps.
I do think that a part of that is sort of the game script situations. I mean, you saw him get a lot more of a role in that Kansas City game, which was close for a while. Then it sort of spun away from them in the second half of that game. I think if this game stays close, they want to be more Damian Harris with Burkhead using some spot stuff. But if they have to throw, they trust Burkhead right now out of that core running back group, or Burkhead and White in some 20 personnel packages. Other thing we haven't talked about, guys, they're getting next to nothing from the tight end position. Another huge question mark. And when you want to be this sort of ball control passing game, you want to do a lot of 12 personnel stuff. If you're not getting anything from that tight end, that's almost a wasted spot in a sense. And so that's a huge problem with them right now. I mean, some roster decisions have come back to sort of roost this year, and it's causing a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you're rolling out Ryan Izzo, pretty much your main tight end there, and Devin aside, to a real lesser extent, Dalton Keene. Limited snaps for both of those guys, really, but it's really Ryan Izzo, the guy more or less being a blocking tight end. And it makes sense. I mean, I guess that's what you have to do. But yeah, I mean, that limited tight end receiving threat that we've always been used to in New England in some way or another is not there. And it's got to, Cam Newton even likes you with Greg Olsen. I mean, it matters. And
you can do, especially when so much of your offense is going to be built about play action. There's nothing to throw off a play action than that crossing route to the tight end working behind the linebackers who you've sucked down with that fake. If that's not really an option for you, if that's not a big part of it because you can't get the production from those guys, that's something that's missing. And it's missing right now in New England.
And I'm a big fan of the Patriots offensive line. You touched on it. They've taken some heat. I know that game, was it against Denver where they were missing plenty of their starters?
Yeah.
It showed. I like the depth they have, even without their vaunted offensive line coach. I mean, I think it's a good unit. I mean, their PFF numbers are good if you go by that kind of thing. I like them as a unit when I watch them. They struggled at times, but really, who hasn't in this so far in the league? There's been some bad offensive, even the Bills, who thought they were going with a pretty strong offensive line, and struggle at times. Some interior line problems, really good tackle play in Buffalo, but some struggling at guard right now. But to me, outside of some lapses and maybe a game or two, I really like the talent on that offensive line. And if there's a get right moment for New England, it definitely has to be there. I heard that the three trendsetters are right there in the interior offensive line, just as important as your DBs. So that's really important. And I think they're good. And I think they're good enough, especially if Bills team's going to be missing some of their interior present, going to rely a lot on Ed Oliver, journeyman Justin Zimmer. Harrison Phillips will probably be up in this game, and after getting benched, looking terrible. So, I mean, they're going to put away some of that depth that they kind of built, and they're going to have to go against a pretty strong offensive line without two of their better interior defensive linemen coming off of a game where they looked so dominant in this. I know it was the Jets, but it was good for the Bills to look so 4 yards against Alabama. Is good. So Jerry Hughes was dominant. Trent Murphy gets a lot of criticism for his contract, but is efficient when he's in the game. So, that Bills defensive line is really important in this game, Mark. And that New England O-line, if there's a way that they get right, whether it's Cam Newton, Brian Hoyer, Jarrett Stidham, it's there. I mean, it's there for the Patriots.
That's why, Kevin, a lot of Patriots fans were excited to see the weather reports, because we thought this might turn into a ground game. This might turn into a trench game. And if it does, Patriots fans kind of like their chances with this offensive line, as banged up and as mismatched as it's been at times. It's still a talented group. I mean, the talent across the board is there. And so if it does turn into that, weather game, trench game, we do like our chances with the football on the ground behind this offensive line with Harris, with Burkhead, even with White at times. But again, it spins back to can they keep it close? Can it be a one-score game?
You have to throw in the fourth quarter.
I mean, that ultimately might decide this game. If they have to be a thrown team in the fourth quarter, we might know where this game is going come, 10 minutes to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we'll see if that weather reports come true. Bills are preparing for it as well. Josh Allen, obviously very strong arm quarterback. Struggle against Kansas City and limited rest. There's so many things going on that wasn't just weather related. Patrick Mahomes was off key in this weather.
Yeah,
we'll see what it looks like, but I've watched Phillip Rivers come into to Ralph Wilson Stadium or Bill Stadium or New Airfield, whatever it's called, depending on the season. And I've watched him dominate. And this was Phillip Rivers. So people can beat that wind. It's kind of a misconception that you can't throw in the wind. It actually gives a huge advantage to a quarterback who can throw in this wind. We'll see if Brian Daboll opens the system up to Josh Allen to be able to do so and at least keep it intermediate. You're not going to go deep. But intermediate throws are still there. I mean, they're still there for you if you're cutting the wind. So as a quarterback guy yourself, maybe you would know the mechanics necessary to beat that kind of win element. But I've seen it happen in person. I've watched it, and and Tom Brady could have been one of them at times that has been able to beat the elements. Are like, great, that's going to hurt their quarterback, not us. So that is still a factor. So we'll see if this weather comes in and how it affects Cam Newton and Josh Allen. Lastly, on the Patriots offense, I wanted to ask you about Stidham. If he was really the future, why wouldn't he be playing right now? I mean, you're not getting anything out of Cam Newton, especially post-COVID. And Brian Hoyer, Stidham.
Kevin, I think you kind of answered your question there. I mean, if he was the future, why wouldn't he be playing? Well, I mean, we've seen there. I mean, we get the time. Every game he's made an appearance, he's thrown an interception. I mean, and I know there was some excitement. Myself included, we thought there was potential here with Jarrett Stidham. But it hasn't quite panned out. Now, maybe at some point they can sort of piece together an offense around him, but I think that ship is slowly starting to sail off the horizon here. So, maybe if they do lose this game and they decide, look, we have to evaluate the roster now. This is no longer a 2020 season; it's a 2021 season. You might see them decide, okay, we have to figure out what we have in Jarrett Stidham going forward. Absent that, though, I think they're going to roll with Cam Newton at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought my buddy's an Auburn guy. He went to Auburn, so we've always given him shit about Jarrett Stidham, and he's not living it down. I can promise you that. Moving it into the defensive side of the ball, it's no secret Patriots in the offseason made a lot of headlines about opt-outs from various people, Patrick Chung, Donta Hightower. As a whole, how have you seen those affect the Patriots defense? Is it less or like more than maybe you've expected?
I think it's been a bit more, especially with respect to Patrick Chung, because he was kind of a core component of what they want to do defensively. So many of their sub packages, your 3-2-6s, your 2-3-6s, they use him in that sort of hybrid linebacker safety type role. They trusted him covering tight ends. They trusted him to stop the run. When they would rotate into their sort of 5-1 or 6-1 fronts, they put Van Noy and Hightower on the edges and then have him almost as a middle linebacker. And they hope that Kyle Duggar could sort of grow into that role, and that's been a tough transition for him. Obviously, this year it's 2020, it's COVID, it's everything. So rookies are having, across the league, I think some of them are having to adjust because they don't have the full training camp experience. We're seeing that with Kyle Duggar. They've used Juwan Williams at time, who was a corner at Vanderbilt, to be sort of a tight end guy as a safety. There's been mixed success with that. And then with respect to the linebackers, I mean, Hightower's opt-out is just one component of it. You had Van Noy going to Miami. You had, Jimmy Collins going to Detroit. And now your other veteran linebacker in Hightower opts out. That's put a lot on Juwan Bentley. They've used guys like Adrian Phillips in sort of a hybrid linebacker type role. And they're really sort of piecing it together. And then the talent drain has had an impact on this defense. It's still okay. You look at the Denver game. They gave up 6 scoring drives out of the gate, but they were all field goals. Like, they could do some things to slow you down. But the problem is when the offense is struggling, you have to be perfect as a defense. Like, You can't make a mistake. If you give up a touchdown, if you have 2 touchdown drives or 3 scoring drives in a row, one of them's a TD, suddenly it's, 16 or 13 nothing, and your offense can't make up the difference. And that's kind of the problem right now. I do think that, Belichick has had some success against Josh Allen. I think you'll see a variety of coverages in the secondary. I know a lot of people are looking at zone coverages versus Josh Allen and things like that. The interesting thing is Bill Belichick loves playing himself some man coverage. So I think you'll still see a lot of man coverage. They'll do some robber and some rat type stuff to give him some different looks, to give him zone type looks. They'll show him zone and spin to man and things like that. But it'll be an interesting game and from this perspective. In terms of what Bill Belichick and that secondary does, against Josh Allen, Brian Dable, in that matchup on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, Juwan Bentley's really your main linebacker now. He's the only one really getting 324 snaps there, really getting the main crux of the snaps. I mean, has anything changed schematically for New England on the defensive side, losing some of that talent, some of that opt-out? Like you mentioned, the guys that left to Detroit and Miami, has that affected schematically what they're doing defensively?
Not too much, Kevin. They have used a lot of sub packages like in years past. A lot of 2 and 3 and sometimes even 1-man fronts to get more defensive backs on the field because that is their deepest position, that secondary unit. So they rely on those guys. They use them in a number of different roles, like I mentioned with Phillips and Terrence Brooks and some of the other guys in that secondary. They've found ways to get them involved. The problem because at times, they've struggled to stop the run. And then there have been other times when they've struggled to stop the pass. I mean, Seattle and Russell Wilson carved them up pretty good on that Sunday night game back in week 2. They've had some struggles with guys in the interior, and they've had struggles set in the edge. And that was a huge reason that they got down early against San Francisco. And part of that was what Kyle Shanahan was doing schematically with some jet motion, some orbit motion, some screen stuff to get plays designed to the flats, to the edges. But usually they're, disciplined and sound on that side of the football. We've seen some mental lapses. You saw one back at week 2 on a wheel route that went uncovered out of the backfield for a touchdown. You saw one for a big throw this past Sunday on a simple switch concept to the right side of the field from San Francisco. You had 2 guys cover the short curl route. Nobody covered the wheel route, and it was wide open. These are the kind of breakdowns you're seeing from the Patriots defense this year, which is uncharacteristic of a Bill Belichick defense. And I think part of it is new faces, moving guys around, trying guys at different roles, using safeties as linebackers. Again, that talent drain on that side of the football it's starting to show right now.
Yeah, those orbit motions were brutal.
Yeah.
Last week they crushed you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think Brian Dable's like a little bit of Kyle Shanahan light. Watching the Rams and the Bills play was very was interesting. Just so much misdirection. Like 80 points were scored in that game. There were players everywhere. Isaiah McKenzie's taking jet sweep reverses, Philly specials, and Brian Dable's gonna, just like it's a copycat league, Brian Dable's gonna watch what San Fran did. And I would imagine you're gonna see a lot of Devin Singletary.
And
he hasn't played great.
What's interesting about that is because it had a trickle-down effect in that game, guys, where Bill Belichick wanted to play man coverage, but because of all that motion, he was having guys chase the motion. He decided, look, we're going to play more zone. And then they started to get carved up on zone, on play action, because, again, that's not where they want to be as a defense. And so that's going to set up an interesting dichotomy. The book on Josh Allen is you want to play more zone coverage. Yeah. Well, if you're using the motion, does that get the Patriots to play more zone coverage, which they don't do well, but then that works against Josh Allen? That's one of those tensions in this game I think will be interesting to see unfold, because I do think Belichick wants to stick with man coverage, and he's going to trust that, and he's going to trust his guys. But that may work to Buffalo's advantage because we've seen Allen carve up zone coverage this year, dating back to week 1.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a really interesting battle. And I think that if they start in man, I mean, that leaves some running room for Allen, and he'll get out there and run, especially in this quote unquote weather conditions.
Yeah.
It'll get him out in the edge. They'll call some quarterback runs. Brian Dable's not scared to do that. They'll call some power. So we'll see what they do in this man coverage, but Josh Allen's been pretty good against it. He's been pretty good against the blitz. He's good in the red zone. Josh Allen's been kind of a revelation here this year. Had some down moments, had a bad game against Kansas City and some elements. The Tennessee game was just weird. It was just bizarre. You didn't take much out of that. Yeah. The defense had missing half its defense.
Yeah.
Bizarre. They didn't know who they were playing. Really some weird things. I don't take anything out of that game. Tennessee was very favored in that decision, but that's a discussion for another day.
I feel like we say that every episode since that game.
that day hasn't came where we break down the unfair rulings that they had 16 days. No, the longest time between a game ever, Mark, was the Tennessee Titans Bills game.
Yeah.
16 days of rest. So maybe rest matters more than practice. I don't know. I'm not sure.
There's some things this year. I mean, yeah, I take that Tennessee game and I throw it out the window. Like, it's just a one-off kind of weird set of circumstances. Sitting here from a Patriots fan going into this game, I mean, you can tell that I'm not exactly optimistic about this contest.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are ways that the Patriots could win this game. But I think if you sort of take a step back and just neutrally evaluate where these two teams are right now, yeah, the Bills, didn't play the best game against the New York Jets, but look at what the Patriots have done the past 2 weeks and tell me which team's the better team.
Defensively, the Bills will come out saying even against KC, they're going to die on the hill of that they played Patrick Mahomes 3 times ever. He's 26 or less points. They're going to die on the hill that they did everything right. They limited him to 220 yards. They're going to die on the hill that the defense actually did its job against KC, and they didn't do their job against Tennessee. But they're going to say that they did their job against KC, and they did their job against New York, allowing just 4 yards, getting after with pressure, turnovers. They had rookie cornerback, 7th-round pick Dane Jackson up here picking off Sam Darnold. So they're going to say that they did everything in that game defensively, and they're hoping to bring that into this contest. And I know Jake likes to ask this question
every time.
What do you think of Josh Allen as a quarterback guy, a guy that's just totally different against mechanics, has kind of already beat the mold of should he be good? Is he inaccurate? Can you teach accuracy? Where do you stand on as a quarterback guy on Josh Allen? And does it just totally rub you up like we've seen others? Like where are you with him and his development, and where you stand on him as, he's had this humongous 16-game stretch?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're watching Josh Allen this year, you're seeing the signs that you were hoping to see from him when he was drafted. The ability to make reads, make throws, throw with touch, time, and anticipation with trajectory, also to those arm talent boxes. I mean, it's like when Happy learned to putt. We're seeing that kind of stuff from Josh Allen right now. And what's been amazing is the anticipation stuff. Because that is, for me, a box that I look for young quarterbacks to check. When the ball's coming out on time, in rhythm, before the break, that's a sign that the game is slowing down for him. That's a sign that he's trusted his eyes, trusted his reads, trusted in the concepts around him, and he's figuring the game out. And that's been a big part of his development this year. Some of those anticipation throws against the Rams were just incredible. I did a video breakdown of that I've watched a ton of Josh Allen. I've been very excited to see his development. I know he's struggled in the past couple of weeks a bit, but the reason he's struggled is because teams can't just do what they do against him and win now. They have to make adjustments. They have to show him different things. They have to alter their game plans and do more schematically to try to confuse him, to try to make him second-guess himself. When you have to do that against a quarterback, it means the quarterback's playing well. So in a sense, Josh Allen's struggles the past couple of weeks are a sign of his growth because teams now have to do different things against him. And that's what you want to see. You want to see teams feel like they have to challenge your quarterback. Because if they can just spot drop it to cover 3 and cover 4 and know that the guy's going to make a mistake, that's when you have That's when you have a problem with your quarterback. Teams can't do that against Josh Allen right now. And that's a big sign of his growth.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a little pessimistic about it just because I feel like that's what I'm used to be feeling about quarterbacks here in Buffalo. But I feel like you summed it up pretty well, actually. And, if Bills fans, if you just tuned in, rewind 30 seconds to the beginning of when Mark started talking, I really liked what you said. So thank you there. I know we're running short on time, so, we'll do some predictions here. Start out with you. I know you said you're not overly optimistic for the game. We've had Jets the Jets guy that we have on here. The first time he picked the Jets to win despite not being optimistic. What do you see happening this weekend on Sunday?
I see this as a 21-10 Buffalo game. Like, I just sitting here right now, I don't see New England having enough offensively to win. I see, Buffalo's going to get, they'll probably get a defensive score or a defensive turnover that's going to set them up with a short field, and they'll take advantage of that. And then they'll probably get, another touchdown or two along the way that gets you to the 21. And I see a scenario where New England's offense in their passing game is going to continue to struggle, and Buffalo is going to be able to capitalize as a result. Now, weather and stuff could change things, but maybe not even that much. So where I sit, I see 21-10 Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you. I actually have 21-16 Buffalo. I actually think Belichick will do everything he can to keep it close. He'll have some. I think he'll disguise some stuff for Allen. Keep it to 21. It's probably where they want it to be to have a chance. Keeping Josh Allen historically to 17 to 20 is the range. If you can keep him there, that means he struggled a little bit, and that means that generally the team has a chance to win. But when Josh goes up 24 points, the Bills are 18-2. So they're in good shape if you get him to that mid-20s number. That means he's roaring, even if he has 6 or 7 fourth quarter comebacks. So even if you do what you want on offense, if Josh Allen's roaring, the number's 20 points usually. If the Bills get to that 21 number, which we're all saying they might right there, that's usually boding well for Josh Allen. So I particularly think he'll take what they gave him. We saw it against the Jets. If we're going to kick field goals, play some defense against Cam Newton like they did against Sam Darnold, they'll take it. They clearly think that they have some stuff figured out defensively. They're going to stack the box, do whatever they can against the run game. We didn't mention Julian Edelman being out of this game. And N'Keal Harry mentioned a little bit, but he's out as well, potentially with a concussion from the throw we mentioned earlier. Not that there was a huge passing game presence for New England, but that stings. I mean, you can't lose Edelman. He's a guy I hate playing. Yep. Bills struggle historically against him. The Bills struggle historically out of the slot. They struggle against Jamison Crowder. That's a huge nugget for the Bills. If their passing game was to get going and the short passes that might be needed in the weather, that's just completely. So we're going to see a lot of Jacoby Myers, I'm going to imagine.
Bird, and then maybe a lot of 20 personnel stuff with the 2 running backs on the field. So yeah.
Interesting. It's going to be an interesting game, but I'm right with you. I have a 21-16. I think New England will do enough. The Bills have been known to let a little bit up if that means if they bend it but don't break pretty often on defense, and it's frustrating. But they will probably let the Patriots run the ball a little bit to keep them, especially if the Bills are able to score a little bit. So I think it's going to be an interesting game, and one, like you said, it's important for New England too. Not just like if they get a win, I mean that has to rethink the season. I mean,
if they win,
interesting.
I think you think maybe you can make a run at it. I mean, that's why I think this game is going to be so determinative. Perhaps not just what happens the rest of the way, but over the next couple of years, perhaps in New England.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys on this one. Just little sidebar real quick. Andrew Siciliano tweeted this earlier, and I think he's got a really good point. The last time the Dodgers won the World Series was during Week 8 of the NFL in 1988. That week, the Cowboys were 2-5, and they lost to the Eagles. They're going to lose to the Eagles this week. The Bills beat the Patriots, finished in first in the division later that year at 12-4. Also, then the Browns made the playoffs. 3 NFC West teams won 10 games, and the Lakers won the title as well that year. So the stars are aligning. It's going to be a Bills win. I think it's going to be ugly. We're all going to be mad watching the game for most of it, I imagine, no matter what team you're rooting for.
Both teams, yeah.
I think it's going to be 20-13, both teams missing an extra point. Just because the wind, it's going to be that kind of annoying game where it seems like that's going to happen. But that just about wraps it up here. Mark, really, really thank you for making the time today. Know you have a busy schedule. Maybe you can talk about, for any Patriots or Bills fans who want to read up on the Patriots, where can they find your work right now?
Well, guys, thanks so much for having me. This was a blast, fun game to talk about. You can find me on Twitter at Mark Schofield. Like you said, I work for right for Pat's Pulpit, USA Today's Touchdown Wire, a couple of other different places, but the easiest place on Twitter at Mark Schofield.
For sure. I definitely followed you for a while. I've listened to you on WGR when you've gone on there, and so it's been nice to finally connect with you myself. And next time we play you guys, be glad to have you back on and revisit this and see how things are going.
Would love to.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Kevin, I know I'll see you on the pregame show this weekend. And everybody else, make sure you get some Picassos for this weekend. Get some delicious cup and char pizza. Make them part of your game day traditions for this season and many seasons to come. For Kevin, Mark, myself, all of Trainwreck Sports, we'll see you at pregame.